My wife's mother threw me out of my first family vacation, yelling, "You're just a substitute, not a real dad." I kept quiet. 6 months later, the resort manager handed her a letter I left behind. It was late afternoon, and the sun was starting to fall low over the water when Quinn asked if I wanted to help him with the raft again. Sure, I said, like it wasn't the most meaningful thing I'd heard in weeks. Celine smiled at me over her book. He doesn't ask unless he means it. I nodded. We both knew that. That kid was not one to fake interest. Especially not with me. We were halfway through our family vacation in Bar Harbor, Maine. It was supposed to be a bonding trip, me, my wife Celine, her son Quinn, and the extended family. Her sister and brother-in-law, their kids, and, unfortunately, her mother Annette. Now, before I say anything else, I want to be clear, I never wanted to replace anyone. I'm not trying to be Quinn's dad. He has a father. He's not a great one, but he's alive and still makes rare appearances that keep Quinn from ever fully letting me in. I get it. I respected it. And I was okay just being the guy who shows up when he needs someone. But Annette never saw it that way. From the day I met her, she saw me as the intruder. She's one of those women who thinks everything has to follow a script. A nuclear family, a real dad, a proper upbringing. Celine's divorce years ago threw a wrench in that, and I guess I'm just the walking, talking reminder that her daughter didn't live up to that image. From the beginning, she didn't hide it. The first dinner we had together, she barely looked at me. At our wedding, she gave a toast that was really just a passive-aggressive letter to Quinn's biological father. Every holiday, every visit, she made it clear I wasn't part of the picture in her mind. Celine always tried to make excuses. She's old-fashioned, she'd say. She just wants what's best for Quinn. But I could see the tension in her eyes too. The embarrassment. The helplessness. This vacation was supposed to be a reset. That was the idea. A neutral space. Ocean air. Time together. And honestly, for the first couple of days, it looked like it might work. Quinn wasn't cold. Not warm. Exactly. But he responded when I talked to him. He laughed when I made a dumb joke during mini-golf. He even asked me to help him carry his kayak one morning. It felt like we were slowly, naturally finding a rhythm. But Annette was watching. Always watching. I noticed it the first night. She accidentally corrected the receptionist at check-in when my name was listed as Quinn's guardian. "Oh no," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "He's not the boy's father. He's married to Quinn's mother, that's all." I didn't say anything. I never do in those moments. Not because I'm afraid, but because I don't see the point in feeding her need for drama. That week, every conversation with her was a test. If I talked to Quinn too much, she'd find a way to pull him away. If I stayed quiet, she'd comment on how distant I was. Every time I helped set up dinner or offered to clean something, she'd say, "You don't have to pretend. We've got it covered." She didn't say it with a smile. She said it like I was a stranger wearing someone else's shoes. Celine noticed, of course. She always does. But she was stuck between the people she loved. Between the mother who raised her and the man she married. I didn't want to force her to choose. That's never been my style. So I let it slide. Over and over. Until the third evening. Celine had gone to town with her sister for a spa appointment. I stayed behind with Quinn, who had wandered off to the game room to play pool with his cousins. I sat by the pool with a book, trying to give him space, when Annette walked over with purpose. "I'd like to speak to you alone," she said. I put the book down, knowing where this was headed. She sat beside me, adjusted her scarf like she was preparing for a speech, and said it. "You need to leave." I blinked. "Excuse me. This vacation was meant for family," she said. "You've inserted yourself into something that's not yours. You're confusing the boy. And quite frankly, you're making Celine's life more difficult by always hovering." She was calm. Too calm. This wasn't a tantrum. This was a plan. "I've arranged a car to take you to the bus station," she said, like she was the concierge of my life. "Your things can be packed discreetly. No need to make a scene." I looked at her for a long time. It wasn't just hate. It was a pity. She really saw me as a pathetic figure. Some guy playing house. I didn't argue. I didn't fight. I stood up, walked to the room, packed my bag, and wrote a short note for Celine at the front desk. "Tell Celine I'll be home. I'm sorry to leave. Please give Quinn my best." That's all I said. Then I got in the car. And I left. No goodbye. No one asked where I went. No one stopped me. The ride home felt like failure. Celine called that night. She was livid at me, at her mom, at herself. She didn't even know I'd left until she found the note. "I would have fought for you," she said through tears. "I didn't want you to have to." But something changed after that. Slowly, subtly. We went to counseling. We started setting real boundaries. Celine told Annette she wouldn't tolerate her behavior anymore. That she was done pretending things were fine. It was the first time I'd seen her choose us, me, and Quinn as her main priority. But still, things weren't back to normal. Quinn had gone quiet again. Whatever connection we had started to build was gone. He barely looked at me during dinners. He'd disappear into his room. It was like the raft we'd built together had sunk, and neither of us wanted to rebuild it. Until Christmas. That night, Annette showed up with gifts. One of them was for me. I opened it cautiously. It was a parenting book. The title? Stepping In, Stepping Out, a guide for temporary guardians. I didn't laugh. I didn't speak. I just got up and walked out onto the snow-covered porch and stood there for a long time, watching the sky, breathing deeply. That night, I started writing a letter. Not a rant, not a threat, just the truth. Something honest, something final. And 6 months later, I had my chance to deliver it. Celine wanted to go back to Bar Harbor. She wanted a redo. A real family trip, just us, her sister's family, and Quinn. She promised me her mother wouldn't be invited. But, of course, Annette showed up. She called from the road a day before our trip. Said she couldn't stay away. Celine looked like she wanted to cancel everything. But I said no. Let her come, I told her. Because I had a plan. Annette arrived on the second day of the trip, exactly as I expected, dressed like she was attending a tea party instead of a beach vacation. She didn't acknowledge me directly. She greeted Celine and Daria with air kisses and gave Quinn a careful hug that said she'd missed him terribly, even if she never actually called or texted him the rest of the year. Me? She offered a smile. The kind people use when they see someone they forgot owed them money. The weirdest part was that she didn't say anything harsh this time. Not a single comment. No jabs, no passive-aggressive remarks. Just polite silence. And that somehow felt worse. It was like being erased in real time. But I didn't give her much space to play with. I stayed focused on Celine, on Quinn, on being present. I helped set up for breakfast, went on a hike with Daria's kids, and played paddleball with Quinn on the beach. I wasn't performing, I was just living. For once, I wasn't watching my back or waiting for the next insult. And the more I ignored her, the more I could feel her getting uncomfortable with the lack of reaction. Annette is the kind of person who thrives on control. If you don't feed her outrage, she doesn't know where to aim it. On the third day, I spoke to the front desk manager, Lionel, a kind, older gentleman who'd been working at the resort for years. "You were here last summer, weren't you?" he said. "Left early, if I recall." "Yeah," I replied, hoping for a better outcome this time. I handed him the envelope. It was thick, cream-colored paper, hand-signed. No email, no digital message. Just a real, tangible letter. "I need you to give this to her on the last day. Quietly. When she checks out." He looked at the envelope. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "Completely." The rest of the week played out like some strange performance of a family trying to act normal. Celine and I went on a short boat ride, while Quinn stayed back to watch a soccer game with his cousins. We shared soft, grateful smiles and leaned into each other during meals. And then there was Quinn. He wasn't fully there yet, but he wasn't cold either. He started doing this thing where he'd hang around when I was nearby, not joining in, not talking much, just being there. When I grilled burgers, he stood by the cooler. When I was setting up chairs outside the cabin, he handed me the folded blankets without saying a word. He still hadn't asked me anything personal, still hadn't brought up the previous trip. But one evening, while we were both sitting on the deck listening to the distant sound of waves, he broke the silence. "You still do that woodworking stuff?" I looked up, surprised. "Yeah, haven't made anything big in a while." "Why?" He shrugged. "Just remembered. That box you made Mom for her jewelry? It was cool." I waited, not wanting to push. "I was thinking," he continued, staring out at the dark water. "It'd be cool to make something together." I nodded slowly. "We could do that. Nothing big, nothing emotional." But something had shifted. And Annette? She still watched. Still inserted herself subtly into moments she wasn't invited into. But there was something different in her too. Something almost hesitant. Like she could sense the ground underneath her wasn't quite the same anymore. On the final morning, as everyone packed their things and gathered for coffee in the lodge's lounge, I saw Lionel slip the envelope into her hand. No words exchanged. No dramatic moments. She took it, looked down at it, and for the first time all week, I saw her face shift. She didn't look angry. She didn't look pleased. She looked confused. Like someone had just been handed a key and couldn't remember where they put the lock. She didn't say a word to me as we all said goodbye, just gave a shallow nod. Celine noticed the envelope. She glanced at me once, raising her brow. I just gave her a small shrug, and she let it go. Back in the car, Quinn asked if we could stop for sandwiches before the highway. Just like that. Like we were a normal family returning from a normal trip. And for the first time, it almost felt true. Back home, things didn't explode or transform overnight. Life picked up where it left off, me back at work, Celine catching up on emails, Quinn slipping back into his routines. But something was different under the surface. Like the furniture in our lives had been rearranged ever so slightly. Same house, but it didn't feel quite the same. Celine never asked what I wrote in the letter. Not directly. A few nights after we returned, we were brushing our teeth in the bathroom when she glanced at me in the mirror and said, she seemed quieter on the drive back. I just nodded. Yeah. She didn't complain about anything. Just stared out the window most of the time. We didn't talk about it more than that. And honestly, I was glad. The letter wasn't about making a scene. It was about letting go of a weight I had been dragging behind me for too long. A week later, an envelope arrived in the mail. Thick, fancy paper. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. It was shaky, almost delicate. It was from Annette. Inside wasn't a letter exactly, just a folded piece of stationery with a few lines scrawled across it. I won't pretend to understand your place in Quinn's life, but I can see you're not trying to replace anyone. You're just trying. And maybe that's more than I gave you credit for. That was it. No signature. No love, Annette. Just that. I left the note on the kitchen counter for a couple of days, not really sure what to do with it. Celine saw it one morning and read it without asking. She didn't say anything right away. Later that night, as we were washing dishes, she touched my arm lightly and said, "It's something." It was. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. And then, a few days later, came Quinn. It was a Saturday. Rainy. Celine had gone out grocery shopping, and I was in the garage working on a new shelf I'd promised to build for our laundry room. Quinn came in quietly and sat on the step. "Just watch for a while." I didn't push. "Have you ever made anything out of that old trunk in the basement?" he asked eventually. I looked up from the wood I was sanding. "Not yet. Wasn't sure if it was worth salvaging." "It's solid," he said. "Just ugly." I laughed softly. "A lot of good things start out that way." He nodded. "Think we could fix it up together?" I set the sander down. "Yeah, we could do that." We didn't say much else that day. He helped me clean up the tools. He measured out the frame with me. At one point, I asked him to hold a piece steady while I drilled, and when I looked up, he was watching my hands closely. Focused. Not just helping, but learning. That night, over dinner, he brought it up to Celine. "We're rebuilding the old trunk. Might make it into a coffee table." She looked at me, a little surprised. "That sounds great." And it did. It was slow. Still is. Quinn doesn't call me dad, and I don't expect him to. But we're finding something else, something steady. Mutual. Unforced. We talk more now. Nothing deep, nothing dramatic. But we talk. One afternoon, we were watching a game on TV. Commercial break came on, and he turned to me, casual as anything, and asked, "You think Mom's happier now?" I didn't need to ask what he meant. I looked over at him. "Yeah, I think she is." He nodded slowly. "Cool. Just wondered. There's still distance sometimes. That invisible wall you can't always name, but know is there. But there are more cracks in it now. Light gets through. Celine sees it too. We're more in sync. We've gotten better at being partners, better at backing each other up, better at shutting down the quiet ways Annette tries to assert control when she still does." A few weeks ago, Annette invited us to her place for dinner. Celine didn't want to go. She was ready to say no outright, but I told her we should. Not for Annette. For us. The night was fine. Polite. A little stiff, but no jabs, no sideways remarks. Just food, and talk about weather, and a conversation about Quinn's summer reading list. That was progress. Toward the end of the evening, as we were leaving, Annette pulled me aside. Just me. She didn't say thank you. Didn't offer any grand gesture. Just said, "Quinn looks more comfortable lately. Like he's settled." I met her eyes. "He's getting there." She gave a slow nod. That was all. But for a woman like Annette, that was a lighthouse. The trunk project turned into more than just a weekend activity. Quinn started coming into the garage even when we weren't working on it. Sometimes he'd just sit there scrolling on his phone while I worked. Other times, he'd ask me questions, nothing heavy, just stuff like what type of wood was best for certain cuts, or how I learned to use a planer. I'd answer, and then let the silence sit between us until he filled it again. There was a quiet rhythm forming. I noticed it the most on a random Tuesday evening. Celine was running late from work, and I offered to make dinner. Quinn hovered in the kitchen, grabbing things before I asked. He even pulled out plates without being told. Halfway through eating, he looked up and said, "Did you always want to be a dad?" The question hit harder than I expected. I didn't look at him right away. I needed a second to answer honestly. "I used to think I did," I said slowly. "Then I thought maybe that wasn't in the cards for me. And now," he nodded. "Yeah, makes sense." He didn't say anything more, but he didn't need to. Later that night, Celine came home, exhausted. She curled up beside me on the couch, kicked off her shoes, and just laid there. I told her about dinner, about what Quinn had asked. She didn't say anything right away, just pulled the blanket over both of us and whispered, "He's trying." We both were. Things weren't perfect, and we weren't aiming for perfection, but we were building something real, one unspoken moment at a time. Then came Annette's birthday. We weren't planning to do anything big. Celine had asked her what she wanted to do, and she gave a dismissive shrug, saying she didn't want to make it a production. But a few days before the date, she sent Celine a text asking if we could all go out to dinner, her treat. That was new. Celine showed me the text and waited for me to respond. I could see the hesitation in her eyes. She was ready to say no, but I surprised her when I said, "We should go." It was a quiet Italian place she liked, a little old school, with dim lighting and heavy red curtains. When we arrived, she was already seated, dressed up in that overly formal way she always was, like she was going to church, not dinner. She greeted Quinn first, complimented his hair, then Celine, and then, finally, she turned to me. "Howard." That's all she said. No smile, no frown, just acknowledgement. But it wasn't cold. It wasn't sharp. We sat down, ordered, made small talk. Quinn talked about his history class and the book he was reading. Annette listened. She didn't dominate the conversation like she usually did. Didn't cut anyone off. Didn't correct me when I shared a story. Then, over coffee, something unexpected happened. She pulled a small box from her bag and handed it to me. I looked at it, confused. "It's not a big deal," she said. "Just something." Inside was an old photo of Celine and Quinn from when he was maybe 6 or 7. A beach day, sunlight in their hair, sand on their clothes. Quinn's missing front teeth mid-laugh. I looked at her, unsure. She cleared her throat. "I thought you should have it, since you've been helping him build new memories." That was the first time I'd seen Celine tear up in public. She quickly wiped her eyes and squeezed my hand under the table. It didn't feel like forgiveness. It didn't feel like approval. But it felt like a door cracking open. After that night, things shifted again subtly, but consistently. Annette didn't become warm overnight, but she started asking questions. Asking me questions. Calling the house now and then just to check in. She started referring to things we did together, me and Quinn, not with sarcasm, but with something that almost resembled curiosity. And maybe even, just a little, respect. The letter had done what I hoped it would. Not changed her, but cracked the mirror she'd been looking into for so long. The one where I didn't exist. Or worse, was in the way. She hadn't replied directly to the letter. Hadn't brought it up since that single line in her card. But the difference was in her actions now. Celine noticed too. We didn't talk about it often. We didn't need to. But sometimes, when we were alone, she'd say things like, "It feels like we're finally breathing again." And we were. Still not done, still not simple, but breathing. As things slowly mended with Annette, I kept my expectations low. People like her didn't rewrite themselves overnight. They edit if they're willing, one line at a time. Still, I watched carefully. For months, it seemed like maybe we'd all found an uneasy balance. But like always, there's the surface, and then there's what simmers underneath. In the spring, Celine and I decided to host a family weekend at our place. A backyard barbecue. Nothing formal. We invited Daria and her family, a few close neighbors, and, yes, even Annette. By then, we were cautiously allowing her back into the fold. She came, of course, early and overly dressed for a casual afternoon. She brought a cake from a high-end bakery and 3 bottles of wine she insisted were better than what was already there. But the surprise came in the form of another guest, someone she invited without telling us. Quinn's biological father. Apparently, he'd contacted her months prior. He was reconnecting, or so she claimed. She hadn't mentioned it to Celine. Definitely hadn't mentioned it to me. But there he was, standing in our backyard with sunglasses on and a practiced smile, as if he'd been part of the picture all along. Celine was blindsided. Quinn was frozen. And me? I went completely still, like my body had to buffer what was happening before I reacted. Annette said, with a tone far too casual, "I thought it would be good for Quinn to have everyone here. You know, both male figures. Balance." She said it as though she was talking about matching decor, not people's lives. Celine pulled her aside immediately. I don't know what she said, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. Quinn sat quietly on the steps with a plate of food he didn't touch. His biological father tried a couple of weak, cheerful questions before walking away awkwardly when he got nothing back. Eventually, he left, clearly uncomfortable being around people who weren't fawning over him. And that was when I knew. Annette hadn't changed. Not really. She'd simply shifted tactics. From hostility to manipulation. From attacking me outright to undermining me behind the scenes. Because she couldn't accept that I had earned something she hadn't expected, Quinn's trust. So I decided it was time for a different kind of revenge. Not the kind you read in dramatic novels or courtroom scripts. Something quieter, cleaner. The kind that doesn't need shouting or cruelty. I decided to cut her out, completely, but not in anger. In indifference. I didn't argue with her after that day. I didn't make threats or scenes. I didn't demand apologies. I simply removed her access. Piece by piece. We stopped inviting her. Celine supported it. Fully. We stopped sharing updates, stopped answering her thinly veiled texts asking about the boy. She would send messages about family dinners, birthdays, catching up, and we'd ignore them. Celine and Daria both, after seeing what happened, finally realized the truth. Annette wasn't protecting anyone. She was preserving her own image of control. And Quinn, he never asked about her again. He didn't miss her. Not even a little. He said once, during a drive back from school, "She always made me feel like a project. Like I needed to be saved from something." I asked him if he felt that way around me. He just shook his head. "You were just there?" That helped more than anything. The ultimate revenge wasn't anything I had to orchestrate. It came on its own. Months later, I found out from Daria that Annette had booked another trip to Bar Harbor. Same resort. Same week as the original vacation, the one where she threw me out. Except this time, no one was joining her. Celine had declined. Daria declined. Quinn was already planning a trip with us to visit colleges. And me? I was finishing a custom piece of furniture with him in the garage. The trunk we restored had inspired him to design his own table for his future dorm room. And just to be sure fate didn't miss the irony, I called Lionel, the resort manager. I didn't ask for much. Just asked if he could leave something in the suite she booked. A small envelope, same spot as before. Just one line, typed this time. You don't throw away people who choose to stay. No name. No signature. She'd know. And that was it. No yelling. No bitterness. No need to prove myself anymore. I had already won. Because revenge isn't always about destroying someone. Sometimes, it's just showing them they've lost the one thing they thought they could control and watching them realize they're the only one left clinging to the past.